Welcome back to the First Generation Millionaires podcast. I am your host, Rebecca Barr, and I'm so excited to share with you today's episode, which is actually a little bit vulnerable, a little bit personal, because did you know, if you haven't already read my book, The Good Girl's Guide to Money Making, you might not actually be aware that growing up, I had a very similar experience to Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I wanted to share with you in this episode how that actually shaped my relationship with money and how those early years, childhood experiences could be shaping yours. Well, will absolutely be shaping yours too. So here's the context and the backstory. When became in naval quarters. So he was part of the Navy. Obviously, when he passed, we were no longer part of the Navy, so we had to move on. And in that time, my mum received an inheritance, which had essentially been crowdfunded from the people on his ship because he died very young. He obviously wasn't prepared or anticipating that he wouldn't be here. So we're very fortunate for that. But the way in which the money came to us, I believe that my mum unintentionally self-sabotaged because she didn't feel good about how she'd received that money. It was money that she wasn't used to having. So essentially, she attracted a very financially disempowering partner who didn't make good decisions around money between them both. And ultimately, we ended up losing my house again at around, I want to say between 12 and 14. So what happened was because my mum and my siblings ended up moving into temporary accommodation, into a hostel, I was in high school, and it was kind of, very fortunate for this, but it was decided that the family would kind of take it in turns to essentially host me. Although that wasn't the original agreement, it was I had a family, one side of the family that was willing to take me on to avoid the quote unquote like shame and embarrassment of living in a hostel because I was in high school. And they were very well meaning and well intentioned, and they took me in. But after a period of time, I went to go and stay with another relative, which I thought was going to be for the summer holidays. And I got a phone call while I was there that actually I wasn't going back. And this wasn't round the corner, it was an hour and a half away. So it meant that overnight, I essentially wasn't living with my siblings, wasn't living with my mum, didn't have a dad, overcoming trauma from living with my stepdad. And then had then also lost all of my school friends, my school, everything that I knew. And it actually meant that I ended up having to repeat a year in high school because the curriculum was so different from where I was then sent. And essentially, I then became like an extra child in this house, which had very opposing views on money. So to the first house that I had experienced, where money was very much in abundance, and conversations were very positive and empowering, and we were talking about holidays. So that in itself was a trauma because I literally went up to my other family members for what I thought was the summer holiday and just never went back. So again, had none of my stuff. I just had a little carrier bag that I'd taken my things with. And it was very destabilizing at the time because I felt very vulnerable. Like I say, I didn't have anything that was mine. And even to this day, I've got no baby pictures because my mum, again, lost all of our belongings. So I've got no baby pictures. I've got no toys, no memories, like nothing of my dad. I think I've got one picture in a frame of him. So the whole thing was very sad. And I remember being very sad about that. Like, I've got nothing. I've literally got whatever I could fit in the carrier bag that I came with, and that is now my life. But looking back as an adult and who's healed, and as a parent, I'm realizing how little actually those things meant anyway. It's important to have anchors to your childhood, but I've overcome that and I'm good. So it's not like it defined me. It was a trauma at the time, and it's definitely something that I've had to reconcile with as an adult, especially when it comes to now. If anything, I go the other way when it comes to the kids' memories. I keep everything, and I've had to really keep reining myself back in that these things don't matter. As you know, my legacy is the memories, it's not stuff, and they will be fine without these things. But I do have a few intentional things like baby books and stuff that I have for them, which if we only have that one thing, that's okay. So it's quite an interesting perspective. Let me know if you've ever experienced anything the same, where you essentially lost everything that you owned. um, and it was just super sad at the time, but it's good now. So, but how did that shape my relationship with money? Now, obviously, it was, so much else around that experience that happened, feeling like I'd been discarded, being a perpetual guest in somebody else's house where you're not their child means that you are, again, never really settled, so you're therefore not able to express yourself. You don't have a room, so you're not able to kind of, have a sanctuary or anywhere to go and process. So what happened was that I essentially became very disassociated from my trauma and my feelings and my emotions. So I went through, which has actually made me a really great coach, by the way, because it's meant that I can detach myself from situations. I'm great in a crisis. If anything, part of that process was, it made me a very inquisitive person. It made me very much a gentle observer of things that were going on around me, because I couldn't be involved in them firsthand because they didn't concern me. They didn't relate to me. I wasn't part of that tribe. And that is one of our basic human needs, is to be part of a tribe. And I never really had that. I was always the eternal outsider. And equally, I've had to do a lot of unpacking with that. But in the very literal sense, I also had a really great education around money mindset. And I think that one of those things planted that seed of curiosity around it, because I could connect the dots. I was always old but beyond my years anyway, because of what I'd experienced growing up. But I was able to start to look at things and think, interesting. Why do they, the people that have the more money, they speak about it in this way, and the people that don't have money are very suspicious, very negative, always on a hustle, always looking for a shortcut, always trying to make do. They don't even aspire to want more money, even though we all know, especially in today's environment, that there are no end of ways that you can make money, and there's no end of ways that you can change your situation. Your past doesn't have to define your future. And I remember having these conversations with my family member at the time, because she meant so much to me, and yet she wasn't in a great situation. And I was like, that Oprah Winfrey, like, motivational pep talk, like, you can do it, I can help you, we can do da 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 da. And there was no part of her that was accepting that. And I've said, this is why I do the work inside my first generation millionaire academy, because there's so much work when you're not used to having these things. You will unconsciously repel it at every level, even if it's the very thing that you want. You're scared of having it. So, when I then started to do the work and I got my first house at 18, I wanted to bring these family members along for the journey with me. And that can bring a lot in itself, because, like I say, they want it, but they don't want it. So I would end up, I took them to Disneyland. I took them, my cousins, my aunt and uncle, my brother, sister, my niece and nephew, to Disneyland, because I wanted them to experience these nice things, hoping that if they experienced it for themselves, that would create that desire. Now, nobody had told me that, but just intuitively, I was like, they need to see it. They don't know what they don't know, because like I say, I had the privilege of being on both sides of the fence and experiencing both views. And on the other half, going to school with like named brand chocolate in your lunchbox felt like such a luxury. And the way that my aunt on that side of the family was kind of nurturing the kids. She was very much allowing them to be kids, running them a bath, making them dinner, making their lunches. Like, I hadn't experienced that, because I had an emotionally avoidant mum, who was in her own trauma response. So I was very much the adult. I had younger siblings that I was picking up from school, and I was making dinner, and I was making breakfast, because she just couldn't handle any of that at that time. And I do want to caveat it with compassion. And can you imagine, like, being a young mum yourself, then your partner dies, then you go into an abusive relationship, then you lose your money in your home, and then, like, all of these horrible things happen to her, and she'd already had a traumatic life before then. So I have no judgment. It's only compassion, because we are ultimately all just doing the best that we can with what we have available to us. But this is the importance. This is the work. As the first generation, this is your responsibility. If you've got any part of you that knows that you're meant for more, is to pay it forwards to the people that are coming up behind you by committing to that work. So if you haven't read the book, I would love to invite you to do it, because I just felt so seen after reading it. I was like, wow, this is why I felt this way. Um, and like I say, having that emotional detachment my whole life made me feel like there might be something wrong with me. Because for a long time I couldn't cry, like genuinely couldn't cry. And I remember almost like trying to will it out of my face, out of my eye holes. I mean, and even now I struggle when with having that emotional connection because I'm a mum of six and there is so much going on and I've got so much responsibility and so much energy that I need to hold. But I also have to ensure that I don't stay in my wounded masculine where I'm constantly giving out my energy to other people and not allowing myself to receive because that will block your flow of abundance like straight away. So there's so much around the experience, but he talks about being mentored essentially by two different dads. His own dad that was very much, I believe, in lack, and then his friends, more affluent family that his dad and the different advice that he would get around money. You know, his dad would be telling him to save it and be grateful. And then the other dad would be like, no, invest it, grow it. And that gave him such a unique appreciation, again, always coming from a place of gratitude, but an education around how to look beyond your current circumstances and know that there is always a way to get the result that you know in your heart that you are meant to have. And like I say, that was for me the experience because the interesting thing that I probably haven't mentioned is that the the first half of the family where they were more wealthy, that was actually my mum's twin. So my mum is a twin, and her brother essentially went off with a very logical, different mindset. You know, maybe if her twin was a woman, then again, they would have been very much like in the same boat, struggling, but he wasn't. He was, you know, men are very much more logical and unemotional when it comes to men. So, the money, sorry. So they had literally, he'd gone out and made his money and done his thing. And again, you know, didn't have to worry about kids at home. So he had a wife that looked after them. So again, like it's easier for men to make money because they don't have all of the restrictions that we do as women, and labels and expectations and all the things. And he'd gone off and made his money and had a beautiful family and a lovely home. And then lived this life of abundance. Whereas my mum, who had been like the struggling mum that had all these perceptions on herself around what she could create in the world, had never even aspired to more. You know, she worked in the co-op, she worked around us kids, she did little bits here and there, she pieced together lots of jobs, and ultimately, you know, her health got the better of her and then she ended up not working at all, but she kind of resigned herself to that is how life is going to be. And even when we all grew up, moved on, and she didn't necessarily have these restrictions. Now, admittedly, her house was a challenge, but and again, she wasn't living in a time where she could make money from her phone, but she'd just kind of given up and just accepted. And it was very much in constriction and lack. The way that she lived her life was around how she could save money, make a little bit here, make a little bit there, but it was easy come, easy go because that was her experience. So I want to kind of invite you, with that being said, it would be very easy to say, oh, you were homeless and this, and there's so many synergies between what happened to me as when I was young and then how that has played out as an adult. And it's why I talk a lot about financial self-sabotage and all the things. But for now, I just wanted to focus on that the different polarities of the experiences and attitudes around money became the self-fulfilling prophecy, for these sides of the family. So, where is that potentially playing out for you now? So, I want to leave you with this takeaway. Where is that playing out for you now? Can you see similarities and common threads between how your parents spoke about and experienced money and how you witnessed that through your young eyes? Um, and applied literal meanings and unconscious beliefs, and where is that now playing out for you as an adult? And maybe you are the one that has kind of overcome and set the tone. And you know, I became the first self-made millionaire in my family at 25 through property, but I didn't feel worthy of it because that was the thing that had actually shaped me as a child, was always being the perpetual guest, never having anybody that truly has my best interests at heart, never having anybody that would go to bat for me or nurture me or ask me, are you okay? Because they didn't care. I wasn't their child. I wasn't their priority. I wasn't the main focus. And even with my mum, she was in survival her whole parenting experience. She didn't have the time or luxury to ask those questions to me as a child. So it's something that now, even where, I've got a big family, I've got a young family, I always make the time to ensure that I hope my kids feel like they are the center of my world. They need everything. I'm here for them. It's why I homeschool two of my girls, because I knew that the environments they were in weren't good for them at that time. And hopefully they won't have my shizzle won't become their shizzle. They will have different issues and trauma. Absolutely. That's the human experience and you can't avoid it, but it won't be my legacy, won't be them reliving the pain and trauma that I experienced as I was growing up. So how do we do that for you right now? How do we ensure that your shit doesn't spread or impact the people around you and also the generations to come? And I really believe that awareness is the first step and connecting the dots. So what I would love for you to do as a follow-on from today's episode is not just listen to it and think like, wow, she's amazing, she overcame some stuff. It's about actually you're amazing too. You've overcome some stuff, but you might not have even realized that it was stuff for you to overcome. Maybe your parents actually, you didn't have to worry about money, but they were avoidant or absent, and or maybe they made it in ways that were like hard. So now for you're overcomplicating your business, you are making things harder than they need to be. You're not fully appreciating or allowing yourself to receive. Maybe you have picked up things at school and attitudes in society and films that you watch. There will be so much that is shaping your relationship right now and therefore your reality. Um, that is just an opportunity for growth and unpicking and awareness and all of the things. So that is my takeaway for today. I want to always make sure that you have something that you can go away and work on as a result of these episodes. So what did you witness? What did you see? How is that now potentially shaped your reality right now? Sit with a journal, sit with a coffee, have a moment of reflection as you're listening to this. And therefore you can start to reclaim your power, rewrite your narrative, um, reimagine your experience of how things get to be for you as you move forwards. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. I hope that you've got some takeaways from it. Please let me know in the comments. Please make sure that you like and subscribe and share it with somebody else that you think will really gain value. Obviously, this is open to more than just women, so it doesn't have to be a business bestie. Maybe it's a partner or a sibling. Like I say, my brother is always my biggest opportunity in life. I absolutely have a mission to support him to get out of his conditioning and environment to create a life that's more exceptional than it currently is right now, because I know he's not fulfilled. But yes, let me know. I love to create these episodes in collaboration. It's the feminine energy way of leadership, is to create in collaboration. So thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to see you on the next episode.